WCW was nothing if not chaotic, and these wrestlers had runs there that were so forgettable you'd think Ted Turner was handing out Nitol for every appearance. I'm Andy from WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 10 short-lived WCW runs that you totally forgot about. Number 10. Kamala. One of the most recognisable monsters in wrestling history thanks to his Ugandan giant character, Kamala had semi-retired by 1993, returning to the occupation that put food on his table before he became a terrifying wrestler as a truck driver. This lasted until the summer of 1995, when Hulk Hogan successfully talked Kamala out of retirement and into a place in that wonderful stable, the Dungeon of Doom, in which Kamala lasted about 3 months before leaving WCW. But during this time, he did get to participate in the wonderfully deranged Doomsday cage match. So, I guess that's one classic on his WCW resume? I don't know. Number 9. Edge. Adam Copeland's one WCW appearance went down on the 3rd of February 1996 when he wrestled one Meng, aka Haku, on an episode of WCW Pro. His ring name wasn't Edge, Adam Copeland, or even Sexton Hardcastle, but Damon Stryker, and he got himself all the way messed up in just over 2 minutes. 3 months later, he was making around $210 a week doing jobs for WWE, and it's safe to say that this worked out pretty well for him in the long run. Number 8. Jake Roberts. Jake the Snake left WWE after threatening to no-show WrestleMania 8 if the company weren't going to release him after the event. He wanted to go to WCW, but hey-ho, the 90-day non-compete clause said hell no. Still, he reached an agreement worth around $3.5 million a year with executive Kip Allen Bray. So far, so good. But Bray was gone just 3 days before the non-compete expired. Jake was left high and dry. In came Bill Watts, who offered him a paltry $200,000 a year. That's obviously a lot less than $3.5 million, but having burned all his bridges in WWE, Jake had no choice but to sign. He came into WCW and was out of the door by October 92, less than 3 months after coming in. Number 7. Luna Vachon. Another sub-3 month run here, as Luna was only in WCW from April to June 97, reigniting her old WWE feud with Alundra Blaze, now wrestling as Medusa. A largely forgettable run saw Vachon lose every single match she had with Medusa before returning to WWE later in 97, working as Goldust's manager. Number 6. Sabu. If you thought that Sabu's run in WWE after ECW had gone out of business was forgettable, then check out his time in WCW, which lasted from August 95 to October and began in typically unhinged fashion with a wild match against Alex Wright. Primarily used for hardcore spots, as you can probably imagine, Sabu worked a lot with people in the up-and-coming cruiserweight division. At Halloween Havoc 95, he wrestled a short but memorable match with the future Jerry Lynn, primarily because his manager, The Sheik, threw a fireball in Mr. JL's face. That terrible, terrible scamp. But Sabu was out of there within just a few weeks, returning to ECW at November to Remember 95. Number 5. Road Warrior Animal. Obviously, the WCW legacy of the Road Warriors is pretty vast and stretches all the way back to Jim Crockett Promotions and Mid-Atlantic. So naturally, this entry isn't about those runs because you probably remember them if you're as old as I am, but the brief spell that Animal spent in WCW as a singles wrestler from January 2001 all the way up to the promotion's death 2 months later. Debuting in the Sin pay-per-view main event, Animal helped Scott Steiner retain his WCW title with a big beatdown of Sid Vicious. And this was the beginning of the formation of Ric Flair's new stable, the Magnificent Seven, featuring Animal, the Steiner brothers, Ric Flair obviously, channel favourite Jeff Jarrett, Lex Luger, and Buff Bagwell. playing the stable's enforcer until the bitter end, Animal's contract was not picked up when Vince McMahon bought WCW in March. Number 4. AJ Styles. WCW got a full month of televised performances out of AJ Styles before the company died in March 2001. He wrestled as Air Styles back then, teaming with Air Paris to form Air Raid. That's a lot of airs. And they compiled a tag team record of 1-3 before being cast into the Indies following the buyout. Styles was actually given a WWE tryout in July 2001, facing off against his old trainer Rick Michaels before an episode of Raw. He didn't get a contract offer and had to wait for total non-stop action to come along before getting his big break. 20 years later, and he's genuinely one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. But had WWE said yes to him in 2001, they could potentially have had AJ on their roster for 2 decades. That's crazy. Number 3. Sunny. Overwhelmingly popular during her WWE run, being named AOL's most downloaded woman of 1996, Sunny courted mainstream at a time when WWE was struggling. Problems backstage ended up putting a premature and unfortunate end to that, prompting Sunny and boyfriend Chris Candido to go to ECW. And when this went sour, well, they gave Ted Turner a call. Sunny eventually showed up in WCW at Spring Stampede 2000, where she helped Candido become the Cruiserweight Champion, and, well, that was about it, really. Sunny was in WCW for just 1 month. As had been the case in the past, rumours of drug abuse followed her and Candido's departure, and off they went to the Indies. Number 2. Rob Van Dam. The RVD run we're going to talk about here was actually longer than any other one on this list, as he worked for the company from January to June 1993. But it's not exactly the first thing you think of when you consider the man's Hall of Fame career, is it? Signed in 1992, RVD had his first match for WCW in January 93, wrestling as the repackaged Robbie V. Why the name change, you might ask? Because big bad Bill Watts didn't like Rob Van Dam as a name, so it had to go. RVD worked a total of 8 matches for WCW television, working such luminaries as Shanghai Pierce and Kevin Nash in his early form as Vinny Vegas. Leaving just before the summer, he soon wound up in Paul Heyman's ECW, and the rest is history. Number 1. Owen Hart. Believe it or not, Owen Hart actually went undefeated in WCW prior to commencing his most famous run in WWE, winning each and every single match that he had taped for television, which sounds pretty impressive, but there's a reason you never hear about his time with the company. He was only there for a month. Coming in March 1991, Owen was gone by April, returning to WWE for his second run with the company in the middle of the year. Hart and WCW had been involved in contract discussions prior to his departure, but they could never come to terms, with Hart unwilling to relocate his entire family closer to company headquarters in Atlanta. He went back to WWE. Later, he joined up with brother-in-law Jim Neidhart to form the New Hart Foundation, and he ended up staying there for the rest of his career until his tragic passing at Over the Edge. As far as memorable WCW matches or moments go, well, there really aren't any. Owen was only getting started there. He was working against the jobbers of the day, but he did get to have one match teaming with Ricky Morton of the Rock and Roll Express, so I guess that's something? Either way, the month he spent working for billionaire Ted was just a footnote in a glittering career.
When WCW was great, it was fantastic. When WCW was bad, well, we had poor Judy Bagwell on a forklift, Viagra on a pole, and Rick Steiner calling out Chucky of Child's Play fame. Since WCW closed its doors, there's been plentiful time for certain facts and slices of trivia to come to the fore. I'm Andrew from WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 10 secrets nobody has told you about WCW. Number 10. The bite that changed the course of wrestling history. Sure, the Austin era and the wider energy and electricity of the Attitude era is what drove the World Wrestling Federation on its way to toppling WCW. But one other key figure in WWF's success back then was Mike Tyson. Of course, Iron Mike was brought in as the Shawn Michaels biased enforcer for the Heartbreak Kids WrestleMania 14 match against the rising Stone Cold. The appearances of the legendary boxer brought a whole bunch of fresh mainstream eyes to the WWF product, and that magnetism between Tyson and Austin likewise showcased Stone Cold in an impressive light. Oh, how things could have been so different though. As detailed on the Something to Wrestle podcast, Mike Tyson was supposed to appear on the 30th of June 1997 episode of WCW Nitro, an episode of Nitro that took place just 2 days after Mike Tyson took an Evander Holyfield for a second time. Of course, this was the fight where Tyson bit part of Holyfield's ear off, which subsequently saw Tyson's WCW appearance cancelled. Number 9. A fledgling Phenomenal One. While many savvy wrestling fans will clearly be well aware of the Phenomenal One's time with New Japan Pro Wrestling, TNA, and Ring of Honor, a portion of those knowledgeable fans may be completely unaware that AJ Styles ever stepped foot in a WCW ring. Just 23 years of age at this point, AJ landed in WCW at the start of 2001, dubbed Air Styles, and teamed up with Air Paris to form Air Raid. The future WWE champion competed 4 times on WCW television before the company closed its doors, even competing on the final ever episode of WCW Thunder. Of those 4 matches, all of them were tag team outings, and only one, against the Boogie Nights pairing of Das Wunderkid, Alex Wright, and Disco Inferno, was a victory. Number 8. Those early 90s entrance themes. There may well never have been a finer time for wrestling entrance themes than during the early 90s landscape of WCW. Seriously, for Sting alone, he had 2 absolute bangers in the form of Turbocharged and Man Called Sting. Elsewhere, Ricky Steamboat, the Steiners, Lex Luger, Ron Simmons, Big Van Vader, Too Cold Scorpio, Marcus Alexander Bagwell, the Hollywood Blondes, Dangerous Alliance, and of course, anything Four Horsemen related, all had truly magnificent songs during the first half of the 90s. And then there was Ravishing Rick Rude. Seriously, not just is Rude simply ravishing WCW theme a favourite in the WhatCulture office, it's legitimately one of the finest entrance songs to ever grace the wrestling business. He'll steal your girl, break her heart, and leave you a fool. Fan-flubbintastic from singer Pat Peterson on this absolute masterpiece. Go and check it out. Number 7. The training ground of the Great Khali. Whereas you may be surprised to realise AJ Styles competed in WCW, it's even more shocking to learn that the Great Khali spent 8 months honing his craft under the WCW banner. Having made his wrestling debut for US indie promotion All Pro Wrestling in 2000, the hulking frame of the real-life Dalip Singh was quickly signed up by WCW. Following in the footsteps of major stars such as Bill Goldberg and Paul White, Singh was assigned to the promotion's power plant training facility. The 7'1" monster didn't have the opportunity to make an appearance on WCW TV before his time there came to a close, and in terms of that came to a close, Singh actually remained with WCW up until the organization was assimilated by the WWF in early 2001. Following that buyout, the Juggernaut headed to Japan and joined New Japan Pro Wrestling, immediately forming a humongous tag team with the 7'2" Giant Silver before Khali would sign with WWE 5 years later. Number 6. The truth about Lanny Poffo's WCW contract. One of the many stories of the daft amounts of money being thrown around in WCW during the second half of the 90s is that Lanny Poffo was paid by WCW to sit at home for 4 years. While this is strictly true, there's a little more to the tale than Lanny being a pointless financial outlay for WCW back then. As detailed by Poffo in several interviews, yes, he was paid by WCW for 4 years without ever working a single show for them, but this was balanced out by what his brother Randy Savage brought to the table. Notably, the Macho Man brought a $750,000 agreement with Slim Jim with him to WCW, which, let's face it, more than offset the cost of having Lanny contracted to Ted Turner's promotion. Elsewhere, Eric Bischoff has since noted on his 83 Weeks podcast how, unbeknownst to Lanny, Randy also agreed to be paid less in order to accommodate the outlay of his brother's contract. Number 5. Team Canada phone home. Having arrived in WCW in June 2000, Lance Storm soon won the WCW United States Championship, the WCW Cruiserweight Championship, and the WCW Hardcore Championship, all of which he renamed as part of Storm's time heading up Team Canada. While many fans are still irked to this day that the Calgary native was never given the opportunity to become a world champion during his career, things could have been so much worse for the former Impact player. You see, as detailed by Storm himself on Twitter in 2019, there was at one point creative discussions of revealing that Team Canada were actually aliens. Yes, this was real discussions that really happened. WCW, man. It's worth noting that these tentative plans came at a time when Vince Russo and Disco Inferno were on the creative team, and thankfully for Storm and his Team Canada buddies, such an idiotic concept never made it to WCW television. Oh man, and we wonder why this company went out of business. Number 4. 4. Stunning Steve was better than Stone Cold. Hear me out here. Under the guise of Stone Cold, Steve Austin became the hottest star of the hottest period in wrestling history. Still, his work as a Texas redneck isn't a patch on Austin's time being stunning. Of course, this is not to say that Stone Cold Steve Austin wasn't one of the most captivating, iconic, money-drawing figures to ever lace up a pair of boots, flipping the bird, drinking beers, and hitting stunners. Anyone daring to dispute the legacy of Stone Cold is clearly an utter idiot. The point being made here, though, is that Stunning Steve Austin was a far better worker than Stone Cold Steve Austin. During his stunning days in WCW, Austin was a special in-ring mechanic. Whether as a singles act, as part of the Hollywood Blondes, or as part of the Dangerous Alliance, the future WWE Hall of Famer had a style that made him stand out from the pack. It may sound like an extremely minor detail, but just go back and watch some of those matches from Austin and marvel at how he hits the ropes. Such a simple thing, but the aggression, the snap, the crispness, it's a genuine joy to behold. Against the likes of Ricky Steamboat, the Great Muta, Sting, Brian Pillman, the team of Ric Flair and Arn Anderson, and against Sting's squadron in the greatest War Games match in history, Austin was at his in-ring best during those WCW days. Neck and knee issues clearly would force a change to Austin's work as Stone Cold started to catch fire, but his WCW tenure serves as a prime example of how phenomenal a technical in-ring worker Steve Austin once was. Number 3. The Warriors of Kiss. Yes, you may well remember the Kiss Demon from WCW's final few years, but chances are you won't be aware that the Demon was merely intended to be the first of a group of wrestlers named, you guessed it, the Warriors of Kiss. Each of these grapplers would have been handpicked by a member of Kiss to represent them in in-ring action. Clearly, the Kiss Demon played by Dale Torberg was an homage to Gene Simmons and his iconic demon alter ego, and one has to presume that the other Warriors of Kiss would have represented the Star Child, the Catman, and of course the Space Ace. The agreement between Kiss and WCW was overseen by Eric Bischoff, with the promise being that Torberg's Demon would main event a pay-per-view ahead of the Warriors of Kiss becoming a faction. Unfortunately for all involved, Bischoff was out of power by the time the Kiss Demon actually debuted, so as a result of this contractual main event, Super Brawl 2000 featured the Kiss Demon taking on The Wall in what was billed as a special main event, which was so special, it was the 4th match on an 11-match card, lasted for less than 4 minutes, and ended in a loss for the Demon. Number 2. The pay-per-view that never was. Prior to the company being purchased by the WWF, Eric Bischoff was very much in the driving seat to lead a buyout of WCW. So much so, Eazy-E began to map out a pay-per-view called The Big Bang, which would have served as a relaunch of World Championship Wrestling. The Big Bang was even advertised in the second to last issue of WCW magazine, and Bischoff has since detailed the tentative plans for this new WCW. After taking a brief hiatus, WCW would have returned on the 6th of May 2001 with The Big Bang. That pay-per-view would usher in a revitalized WCW with ECW favorite Joey Styles and the then fired from WWF Jerry Lawler earmarked to lead the commentary booth. Heavy hitters such as Goldberg, Hulk Hogan, Sting, and DDP, they were all penciled in as the headline talent, and Bischoff and his Fusion backers were even hopeful of running crossover shows with the World Wrestling Federation. Upon Turner Broadcasting CEO Jamie Kellner deciding that Turner was to move in a direction away from pro wrestling, well, that left Bischoff and Fusion with the unviable option of purchasing a WCW that had zero television commitments, which in turn left the deal and the Big Bang relaunch dead in the water as Vince McMahon instead swooped in. Number 1. Early 90s WCW was better than the Monday Night Wars WCW. When reflecting back on when WCW was at the peak of its powers, many will offer up the famed NWO-driven Monday Night Wars period as being the very best of Ted Turner's wrestling promotion. Sure, those years featured some phenomenal moments and matches, and yes, WCW did beat the WWF for a mammoth 83 weeks in the ratings, but the reality is WCW was a better product at the start of that decade. Going back and looked at the first few years of the 90s, it was a fantastic time to be a fan of WCW. Not only was Sting utterly tearing it up as one of the greatest energetic baby faces the industry has ever seen, but the WCW poster boy was surrounded by so much other awesomeness. On the tag team front, you had pairings such as the Steiner Brothers, Doom, Harlem Heat, the Road Warriors, the Enforcers, the Nasty Boys, the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express, the Fabulous Freebirds, the Southern Boys, Terry Gordy and Steve Williams, the Hollywood Blondes, and the majestic but brief pairing of Arn Anderson and beautiful Bobby Eaton. In the singles ranks, the main event scene was dripping with star power, with Ric Flair, Nikita Koloff, Lex Luger, Sid Vicious, Big Van Vader, Ravishing Rick Rude, Barry Windham, Ricky Steamboat, Paul Orndorff, Cactus Jack, Ron Simmons, and Davey Boy Smith all getting some time in the main event spotlight alongside the Stinger. Even taking a look lower down the card, this period had rising stars such as Stunning Steve Austin, Lord Steven Regal, Brian Pillman, Dustin Rhodes, Two Cold Scorpio Imperial, Marcus Alexander Bagwell, yes, really at that point in time, Johnny B. Bad, Scotty Flamengo, and even sporadic appearances from the legendary Jushin Thunder Liger. Simply put, from the start of the 90s through until the arrival of Hulk Hogan, WCW was ridiculously fun and featured some of the very best wrestling on the planet. Plus, you know, in someone like Vader, the promotion had a genuinely fear-inducing monster who made for the perfect foil to WCW's babyface roster.
WCW was nuts. By the time we got to the year 2000, you would actually not know what to expect, including one episode of Nitro that basically had no wrestling on it. Yep, grappling went full-on sports entertainment. There were also occasions where matches ended dead in their tracks, and as ever, there's a wonderful story behind them all. So I'm Simon from WhatCulture. Please do hit that subscribe button, it's free, and this is 10 moments that literally stopped WCW matches. Number 10, Brian Pillman goes full loose cannon. You knew this was a big deal because Tony Schiavone shouted out during it, "This has absolutely broken down." Boy, howdy had it. Going back to Clash of the Champions 32, Flying Brian Pillman was taking on Eddie Guerrero in what should have been a classic. Still not sure it'd be categorized as that today. Because by late 1995 and early 1996, Pillman had decided the loose cannon persona was what he wanted to throw himself into, and he basically did it without mentioning to anyone that he was gonna do it. So when Eddie was on the offensive and Brian felt the need to back off, he went to the outside, grabbed Bobby Heenan to use as a human shield, and man, the brain freaked out. Suffering from a seriously injured neck that was so bad, Heenan had a no-contract clause in his WCW contract. As soon as Pillman grabbed him in his bad area, he quite literally shouted out, "What the f?" He was so worried he left his position too and just legged it backstage, and while he would eventually return, Guerrero throughout all of this was baffled. Both guys basically stood still as they waited to see what Bobby was going to do, and this is all anybody has talked about since. And again, when you remember the competitors, I don't think that should have been the case. Number 9, Scott Hall arrives. No one remembers this, but it is prime wrestling trivia knowledge. What match was going on when Scott Hall made his way through the crowd and jumped the barrier on the 27th of May 1996 Nitro? You were looking for the Mauler and Steve Dole, and congratulations if you did get it. And on this evening, they were indeed booked to start grappling before stopping in their tracks when Razor Ramon hopped in the ring and started coming a promo. I mean, what must they have thought? Never forget this was a huge deal, especially as it was pitched as if WWE was invading their competition, and good grief did it start a chain of events. Dole would never wrestle another TV match for WCW again, and soon after, the Mauler became Mike Enos and actually hung around for a while. Somehow he never joined the NWO though, which kinda says something. Number 8, Cyclope and Hoovie's Slamboree standoff. A weird one this, but yes, WCW Slamboree 1998 is home to one of the biggest pops in the company's history. With a battle royal to see who would challenge Chris Jericho for the Cruiserweight title, the last two guys were indeed Cyclope and one-time champ Juventud Guerrera. They shook hands before Juve eliminated himself from the thing, and this was genuinely confusing. This wasn't the Macho Man at the Royal Rumble. Why would he do this? As it turned out, it was part of a bigger ruse and a wonderful piece of storytelling by WCW. The big revelation was that this wasn't Cyclope at all, and Dean Malenko was under the mask, a man who had been wrecked by Jericho, including seeing his family get destroyed by the Ayatollah of Rock and Roller. The crowd lost their mind as it all came together as this match did slide to a halt, and if you haven't seen this, what are you doing? It'll make you feel all warm and fuzzy in your tum-tum. Number 7, Halloween Havoc 98's main event cuts out. Well, this is one way to do it. While fans in the arena are allowed to keep watching Bill Goldberg versus Diamond Dallas Page, those on pay-per-view were not, because just as these two bulls were about to lock horns, their screens went black. Ruh-roh. The real kick in the teeth is that this didn't happen during Warrior Hogan 2, which is quite the sight if you've never seen it, and as ever, this was pure WCW nonsense. For you see, most of their pay-per-views went 3 hours, but as this one was pushed to 3.5 hours, and nobody informed the broadcasters, well, you can figure it out. They just switched things off at 180 minutes, and nobody knew what the hell was going on. To sort this out, World Championship Wrestling had to re-air the whole thing on Nitro the following night, and Goldberg must have been pissed. This was one of the best matches of his career, and every time you talk about it, there's a huge caveat hanging over the top. Whoopsie. Number 6, Rick Martel gutted out at Super Brawl 8. Whoosh, this was no fun, but fair play to Rick Martel. He decided he was going to finish his World TV title match with Booker T no matter what, even if he got injured just 4 minutes in. This was bad too, as Martel got hurled into the ropes where he tore a bunch of knee ligaments, and as you have guessed, this thing for a short while just stopped. Booker took a bump to the outside so everyone could see what the damage was, and it was so severe, we had to change all the plans. Because the stipulation to all of this was the winner would instantly face Perry Saturn, and and as Rick was scheduled to win but now couldn't walk, well, we probably shouldn't do that. Instead, he called an audible to let Booker get the W, and I suppose WCW execs thought this was super enjoyable, because he then went on to win the championship too. Martel somehow went an extra 6 minutes in this, but seriously, if you ever watch it, you will see when the match breaks down, and how could it not? I'm amazed we didn't draw a line under it right away. Number 5, Mark Curtis beats up a fan. Go and Google Brian Hildebrand if you want both a heartwarming and super sad story. Dude clearly touched a lot of people's lives, and after being told he was too small to make it as a wrestler, he became a referee, and in WCW at least was dubbed Mark Curtis. As it turned out, his background was going to come in pretty handy on the 8th of September 1997 Nitro. For you see, Brian was officiating a bout between Dean Malenko and Psychosis when a stupid fan decided to rush to the ring. Don't do this, it makes you an idiot. Because Curtis had been prepared for such events though, he jumped on this dude, kicked him, and applied a front face lock as everybody stopped wrestling. Bobby Heenan also started calling this guy a moron, which he was, and it all ties into the fact that Hildebrand was a proper tough guy. This is another reason why we've kind of moved away from big people only. I'm sure Malenko or Psychosis could have handled this fall, but it's far better than they didn't have to. Number 4, Double J lies down. I hate talking about this because it sucks. Whether it actually did stop the match too, I don't know, because trying to figure out what the plan was is near impossible. Happening at the Bash of the Beach 2000, there was meant to be some sort of work shoot that saw Jeff Jarrett lie down so that Hulk Hogan could just pin him. This was all tied into the whole wrestling isn't real nonsense, but yeah, if you had gone there to see a match, you did not get it. You got whatever this was. Something definitely went over the edge as Hogan and WCW fell out badly after this when Vince Russo said some less than pleasant things about the Hulkster, but just go and look at the fans. They all look miserable, and who can blame them? There's every chance this is your cup of tea too, and more power to you, but I dare you to try and get through this entire 12-month period in WCW, and if you are able to do that with a smile on your face, it may just be you and you alone. Number 3, Little Nate says nope. And talking of this madness, you can see the start of it back in April 1999 on Nitro. Kevin Nash was taking on Ric Flair, who at the time was the storyline president of the company, as everybody accused him of being unfit for office because he was nuts. Nature Boy decided he would prove everyone wrong by going bonkers on this show, stripping down and throwing his shoes into the crowd before saying he was now the president of the United States. It ended when Flair was carted off by men in white coats, and I'm not making any of this up, and before all of this as well, we had that match, and did we get a finish? Of course not. Because after Nash had smashed Rick with the jackknife, referee Charles Robinson refused to count the 3, I think because he looked like Ric Flair, when Gorgeous George ran out, knocked out Charles, and sorted the pinfall. This was so I don't even know where to start, but again, this is when WCW hit the insane button and refused to stop until it went out of business 2 years later. Number 2, Hulk Hogan and the NWO. You can't pretend this wasn't one of the best moments in wrestling history, because it was, but it did just stop a match dead in its tracks. I'm not even sure we got an official announcement about what had happened. Going down to the Bash of the Beach in 1996, even when Hulk Hogan was storming to the ring, nobody thought he was actually going to join up with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. That's how babyface he was. It's even more well done because we knew there was a third man, but nobody would have put that on Hogan. But when he dropped the leg on the Macho Man Randy Savage, the world did indeed stop for a few seconds. Then when it started again, fans threw every piece of trash they could find right into the ring. The referee gets decked too, which I suppose justifies the lack of decision making, but this was all about the angle, and therefore everything else just stopped. Number 1, Sid's shin at Sin. Well, this was horrible, wasn't it? Never go back and turn on WCW's 2001 Sin pay-per-view, as you'll have to watch what has to be one of the worst injuries ever. For some reason, Sid decided this was the night to add top rope maneuvers to his arsenal, and my gosh, did it go bad. He was trying to smash a boot into Scott Steiner's face, but instead he landed on his left leg, and the whole thing crumpled. Bah. It was so horrific the match was just thrown out, and what else could anybody do? Technically, Scott could have pinned Sid, but that was not the point anymore. Everyone and their dog just wanted the master and the ruler of the world to get some help. Big Papa Pump just starts doing push-ups as assistants does rush to the ring, and all of this is horrible to see. It's a harsh reminder of what can happen in wrestling, and I would wish this on no one. I love WCW. When it was good, it was great, but when it was terrible, it was even better. Now, this wasn't true when you watched it at the time, but when you tune in today, my word, it's hilarious. It didn't go well because such madness killed the company, and the year 2000 was particularly messy, but still. find an episode, load it up, and here's 10 ridiculous things you learn binge-watching WCW's worst year ever. Number 10, 2000 starts with a WWF ripoff. The very first thing you see on WCW in the year 2000 is Brad Armstrong coming out quite clearly ripping off his brother Jesse James's Road Dogg character. This is the kind of thing World Championship Wrestling thought would captivate the audience. Dubbed Buzzkill, he does just do the same act as if he is one half of the New Age Outlaws, and just go look at the fans. They don't care. They're confused this is still happening because surely the only people getting a kick out of it were Armstrong and Vince Russo. It's rubbish. For context, imagine you tuned into the first Raw of 2023 and it started with somebody called Lenny Crowmager. We'd all lose our minds. And rightfully so. Number 9, there's loads of inward shots. Right, no joke. WCW was so broken even the wrestlers were sick of it, especially because management barely existed. As such, they all started taking shots at their own company. Going back to the 3rd of January 2000 Nitro, DDP arrives for an interview with Mean Gene Okerlund, where Page outwardly asks why WCW flew him in for no reason, and that the travel department sucks. That's actually what he says during a live promo. Months after this, Scott Steiner took it to a whole new level, where he literally said the words, WCW sucked, and you'll be shocked to hear that soon fans started to think, well, all of this must be true. Who'd have thunk it?
Not me.
Number 8, WCW had 3 names for cage matches. Because why have just one? That sounds very simple and boring. We all know in 1999, the WWF tried this with the abomination that was the Kennel from Hell match, and while they learned, WCW took the idea and decided to run with it. Because in 2000, they used 3 different names for the same damn cage match. The first was Caged Heat, which was just stealing the Hell in the Cell idea, but then later on we had the House of Pain and the more classic Steel Cage, but there was nothing unique about any of them. The powers that be just assumed changing what we called it would get the fans excited, and the answer was nope. This was pure law of diminishing returns. By the middle of the year, it meant nothing. Number 7, they had 6 different commissioners. 6! Like flippin' Chelsea Football Club. In fact, this is an actual challenge for you. Go and watch Nitro and Thunder throughout 2000 and try and keep track of who was in charge on screen pulling the strings. You can't do it, which was quite ironic because it was mirroring what was happening backstage, but still, this was ludicrous. The year starts with J.J. Dillon giving up this role when Terry Funk revealed he had taken it over. Weeks later, he then lost this to Kevin Nash at the Sold Out pay-per-view when Jeff Jarrett stepped into line. Why not? Blink and you'll miss that because somehow Ernest the Cat Miller is at the top before WCW hired Mike Sanders and decided he could be the GM. My word, what is going on? Get to October and we shift again as Ric Flair assumes the position, even though Sanders still had the role, and all of this was baffling. It led to a mini feud of sorts until Mike just gave it up, allowing the Nature Boy to see this out before the company was done in 2001. I cannot push hard enough how awful this was, because if you missed 1 week of TV, it was like you tuned out for an entire cycle. Number 6, one of the worst match ideas ever. Not that WCW thought that. They felt like they were onto something. No one remembers it either because why would you? But in 2000, we got Hacksaw Jim Duggan versus Goldberg. Now that doesn't sound too bad, but as awesome as he once was, Duggan was not fit for this role at the turn of the century, whereas Goldberg was halfway through an ill-advised heel turn which made this totally nuts. It didn't work. It also meant nobody cared because there was no reason to, and around the same time, World Championship Wrestling was also booking Terry Funk versus Bret Hart in a hardcore bout. This despite the fact that Funk had retired 3 years earlier and the Hitman was suffering from a serious concussion that would ultimately end his career. If you ever wonder why WCW died a year later, it's really not that hard to figure out. Number 5, Booker T is G.I. Bro. Thankfully, come July of 2000, we did right by Booker T. He became the WCW champion, which was long overdue, and from this point on, he was the best thing about the promotion. Vince Russo didn't see this at first, though, because as good as Harlem Heat were, he thought Booker should turn the clock back and become a character he had used at the start of his career, G.I. Bro. Ruh-roh. It was handled terribly too for the obvious reasons, and once again, imagine we took Cody Rhodes right now and made him the dashing one for a second time. It's not good timing, and it took any interest the fans had and killed it. The fact we switched it back so quickly made it even odder when all we had to do was start 2000 and say, why don't we make Booker T our priority this year? That was too simple for WCW. Everybody had to go through the ringer first. Number 4, a truly astonishing storyline. In April 2000, things were so bad, WCW told Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo to make up and try running the thing together. This led to a soft reset that would give birth to the New Blood Rising pay-per-view, and my word, the build to this. Kevin Nash was the champion, with Scott Steiner and Bill Goldberg being the challengers, and the story was actually that Russo hadn't told any of them who was going to win, so they were mad. And yes, you heard that right, it was like we just pushed play during a booking meeting. It really irked Goldberg, who then refused to take Nash's powerbomb mid-match, so left halfway through complaining about how he was being used. To this day, my jaw drops, and it's dropped right now. The announcers even called him out for this, as they said it meant Kevin and Steiner were now going to have to improvise, which meant we were just telling people wrestling was fake. I mean, this was truly awful. How this was ever going to draw money, I don't know, and I suppose the answer is it didn't, and instead helped end things the next year. Number 3, David Arquette wasn't the worst world champion. Now, do not get me wrong. Even David Arquette knows this was a mistake and told WCW not to do it, and yet for 12 days in 2000, he was indeed top of the tree. You can imagine what fans thought about this. The thing is, it did do what it was meant to do. There was some outside interest. It's not like it popped ratings or anything like that, but it did get some mainstream chatter, so I suppose it had worth. What did not is when Vince Russo decided to do the worst thing possible and made himself the champ too. There were also other runs in this 12-month period that weren't exactly fire, such as Sid Vicious. Now, I love that man, but he held the title on 2 occasions in 2000, and WCW did the grand total of nothing with it. It happened, it ended, that was the whole narrative. So essentially what I am saying is that all of this was bad, and the WCW title was thrown in the toilet. I will never understand what the hell they were thinking. Number 2, Vince Russo doesn't deserve all the blame. I mean, he still deserves a lot of it because his ideas weren't very good, but it takes more than one person to take out a multi-million-dollar company. He was just part of the machine. The truth is, World Championship Wrestling was already in freefall in 1999, which is why Russo was brought in to begin with. Rather than save it, he somehow did make it worse, especially everything between January and April 2000. That was really bad. So I suppose the point of this entry is that now every single poor idea is associated with him, and that's just not the case. It was when any sort of on a pole match was booked, but he doesn't deserve the entire stick waved at him. Still though, I have 5 words for you. Judy Bagwell on a forklift. Number 1, it's really entertaining. Yep, as much as we may take shots at it, this is proper B-movie stuff. It's so bad, it's good. You will never be bored as the ideas get more crazy as the year plods on, and some of the WCW thunders feel like they were actually planned out by children. Just do whatever you want because why not? It is car crash TV with an added dose of pure zaniness, and when you get to the no disqualification matches that end in a disqualification, you'll be in tears. That's not the point, but a fact is a fact. You'll also see the production fall off a cliff and wrestlers just give up in the middle of a match because they can't be bothered anymore. It's not great when you take a step back because again, it ended WCW, but it ain't 2001, it's 2023. We're all aware of that, so just enjoy the ride. Let's just be honest. Now that WCW is dead, and it definitely is, some of the awful moments are hilarious. They weren't at the time, but so much time has passed you can't help but laugh. Because what the flub were they thinking? It still holds a soft spot in my heart and I'll always want to talk about it. So hello, I am Simon from WhatCulture. Please do subscribe. And here's 10 WCW moments so bad, they'll blow your mind. Number 10, WCW goes Montreal. I mean, promotions were still mimicking this in 2007, so it's no surprise just 2 years after the Montreal Screwjob, World Championship Wrestling couldn't help themselves. It just sucks that they made Bret Hart go along with it. Happening during the main event of Starrcade as the Hitman faced Goldberg. It doesn't get chatted about too much because, as you know, this was the night Bill booted Bret in the head and ended his career. I can't say for sure, but I think Bret has most definitely spoken about this. However, the special guest referee was indeed Roddy Piper, and halfway through this nightmare, he just randomly called for the bell. Ruh-roh. Goldberg was in the sharpshooter too, and no, he hadn't submitted. And the worst part was the Washington fans had no clue what was going on. This sort of nonsense wasn't as well known as it would be today, and this was classic WCW management thinking they knew better. They didn't. This was the pay-per-view that was also meant to be as important as a WrestleMania, and they still pulled this. It beggars belief. Number 9, Lex Luger reads Vince Russo's mind. Here we go. Happening on the 15th of May 2000 Nitro, let us set the scene. The opening match was going to be Sting versus Vampiro in a House of Pain, which was basically a massive steel cage. Yes, WCW was that desperate. During this nonsense, Vince Russo also cornered Miss Elizabeth and told her later on that Medusa was going to kick her ass, when Lex Luger appeared disguised as a member of the ring crew. He dropped through the hole in the top of the structure and slapped the torture rack onto Medusa, but how on earth did he know this was going to happen? Nobody had hinted about it, there was no tease, so Lex had just dressed up on the off chance it would actually work out for him. So he was just hanging out. Russo had only just made the match too, so as ever, it was just WCW thinking everybody has to be a surprise, even when it makes no sense. 2 + 2 = potato. The irony of this, of course, is that if all you do is shock TV, nothing is a shock. These guys. Number 8, Hulk Hogan has supervision. Given that Hulk Hogan was part responsible for a huge boom in wrestling, it's amazing he thought it was a good idea to go along with some of this. I mean, even Stevie Wonder could see this was a bad plan. Look at this image though. It is pitch black, right? You can see some lights, but if I told you to identify the wrestler stood at the top, you couldn't. If you tried, it would just be a massive guess. Well, Hogan was there to witness this and was even further away, and yet when he saw it, he just shouted out, "It's the wall, brother!" I mean, there is no flubbing way. This was the 27th of March 2000 Nitro, and Hulk was in the ring cutting a promo, and somehow could see the wall making a chokeslam gesture atop of this building. Which brings up point number 2. The hell is he doing? That's weird behavior. The fans' reaction makes this because they don't get it either and just start looking around, and it is so stupid, it would have been great if they had meant it. As you've already figured out, they did not. Number 7, Oklahoma's medical exam. Do not watch the 7th of February 2000 Nitro. It is offensive and in poor taste then, and it still is now. For some reason, Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara decided insulting Jim Ross would be a fine idea on WCW television, so they created a character called Oklahoma that even had Bell's palsy. I mean, what are you doing? This was definitely the low point because as the fake JR came to the ring, he was accompanied by Dr. Jeter as the pair laughed at the fact Medusa had breast implants. How nobody was fired for this, I don't know. It is bad people doing bad things. It truly is the worst of wrestling and saw fans tune out in their droves, especially the WCW audience. At their core, they always wanted straight up wrestling, and instead they were given nonsense like this, like going out for pizza and someone sticking a piece of glass up your ass. What? Move on. Number 6, let's get excited about the script writers. If you want your heart to break, watch this era of WCW and look at Bobby Heenan every time the camera cuts to him. He knows. How could he not? It was awful on the 18th of October 1999 Nitro when the Brain and lead commentator Tony Schiavone had to sit there and lose their minds because World Championship Wrestling had hired some scriptwriters. Yep. That's what they said on air. Now, of course, this was the announcement that Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara are now with WCW, but still, why on earth would you format that into the show? Nobody cares, just wrestle. As ever, this was done for the insider fan, and back at the turn of millennium, that was even smaller than it is now. So this is really bad World Championship Wrestling. Don't even bother with it. Number 5, the Warrior is in the mirror. As opposed to this, which is good bad WCW. I love it. One of the more infamous angles they ever did. The Ultimate Warrior's run in the promotion was rubbish. There's no point pretending otherwise. He was only brought in so Hulk Hogan could get his win back after that WrestleMania loss, and was given so much creative freedom to convince him to take the L that all of this Warrior stuff was nuts. And I mean genuinely nuts. The 5th of October 1998 Nitro is when it fell through the floor though, and let me explain. As Hollywood was freaking out about the return of his nemesis, he saw the Ultimate One growling at him when he looked in the mirror. That's right, Hogan was seeing ghosts. The problem though is that Eric Bischoff, who was with Hulk, could not see the Warrior, so this was meant to be Hogan losing his mind. If that's the case, however, why could we see him too? That's right. Production-wise, the real-life Jim Hellwig was shown on TV, so who actually was crazy here? Was it us and Hulk? Was it Bischoff? And furthermore, when the hell did the Ultimate Warrior get magical powers? The real icing of the cake is that the announcers also witnessed this, so who the flub knows? Classic right hand isn't talking to the left hand stuff, but man, it's so funny. It is so bad. Like watching a cheap-ass B-movie. Number 4, Ric Flair in the psychiatric hospital. In April 2000, Roddy Piper was able to convince a psychiatric hospital to admit the Nature Boy, meaning a week later, we were going to get some skits, and these were unbelievable. For some reason, the actors WCW hired as extras were told to ham it up too, so it's embarrassing, and the jokes just range from insensitive to wildly inappropriate. During all this, the nurses get perved on constantly too. It sucks so bad. I dare you to load these up and watch them because your head will fall on the floor. And if nothing else, who was tuning into Nitro to see the king of wrestling have to do this? Nobody. That's who. This is the kind of stuff that ruins your fandom because it is totally unjustifiable. You want to kick the TV when you're finished. It is just the worst. Number 3, Goldberg and the script. This may have been the worst WCW storyline, and that is saying something. It was all down to the fact that Vince Russo was obsessed with talking about wrestlers not following the script, which is what he did with Goldberg on the 14th of August 2000 Nitro. For he marched into the ring with Tank Abbott and yelled at Bill, because you gotta use his first name, for not wanting to do his job. Not only did it just tell the audience that what they're watching was all fake nonsense, but it made Goldberg look like an idiot. Once again, fans didn't know what was going on, and the end result was meant to be you thinking Tank and Bill were gonna fight for real. What that says about the rest of the show, I don't know. As ever, the announcers have no clue how to sell this, because if they went too far in either direction, it just exposed the core of wrestling. To this day, it was only designed for one person, and as cliched as it is, it would be like Brad Pitt killing a guy in a movie when he turned to the camera and said, "Hey, don't worry, he's not actually dead." Thanks, Brad. Thanks. Number 2, Vince Russo wins the World Championship. When Vince Russo first arrived in WCW, do you know what he said? "This isn't about me, bro." That was not true. Because not only did he book himself as an on-screen character almost instantly, but on the 25th of September 2000 Nitro, he took on Booker T in a steel cage, and yep, he won the big gold belt. Forget David Arquette, this was bottom of the barrel stuff. There was a dumb finish naturally, as Vince only achieved this when Goldberg speared him through the structure, meaning Russo won on a technicality, but still, why was he even in this position to begin with? He didn't even get beaten for the title as he relinquished it on Thunder a few days later, and his reason was the fact he wasn't a wrestler, so how could he defend it? Well, if that's the case, why the flub were you in a match? Poor Booker T was the guy that had to try and save all of this, and boy does he try. Nobody could have helped though. We weren't writing to ensure we had a good TV show. It was just tricks and swerves constantly. Number 1, Kevin Nash and the missing blood. Right, this is better. It's so funny. Because do you remember when the Brood were running wild in the WWF in the late 90s? The bloodbath was a signature attack, and it was mostly Vince Russo. He loved this for some reason, because he got a kick out of an individual covered in the red stuff. You tell me. He carried this on when he got to WCW and decided his faction, the New Blood, should take up the mantle, and that makes sense. I mean, the clue is in the name. The problem was, World Championship Wrestling was so crazy in 2000 that nothing went right, including here. Because when Kevin Nash was stood in the ring, they triggered this liquid attack, and the blood missed. Yep. It meant Nash stood there in the ring as some red liquid fell from the rafters next to him, and all he could do was just look at it, and then it got even worse. Later, as Big Sexy brawled with these guys, more blood was supposed to hit him, and not only did that miss, but some of it landed in the crowd and hit the front row instead. I mean, this is amazing. It's just amazing. Whether or not such people were compensated, I don't know, when really, if you were going to WCW shows around this time, you should have expected this. I mean, they probably couldn't have even drunk a glass of water, right? Would have just spilled it right on their face. I'm now off to watch more bad WCW moments, and of course, Judy Backwell on a forklift. 20 years later, and I will never ever understand.
WCW may have died almost 20 years ago, but it lasts long in the memory. As World Championship Wrestling started to struggle and lost its foothold in the war, they did what a lot of companies do and panicked. Shock TV sounded like a great idea to try and turn things around, so they did whatever the hell they thought they could get away with. Turns out, wasn't such a great concept at all. I'm Simon for WhatCulture. Please make sure you subscribe. And it's times WCW went too far. The spike heard around the world. We'll begin with a curveball, as this happened way before WCW was on the verge of shutting down, and instead occurred in the late 80s. The rule of the day then was that you could not put blood on television, something Dusty Rhodes had issues with, because man, that guy liked to bleed. Unlike Jesse Ventura in Predator, he had the time. After Ted Turner had bought Jim Crockett Promotions and renamed it though, he allowed the American Dream to keep on booking the promotion because he knew the man was a genius. The only thing he asked was that yes, you can't put blood on TV, Have a guess what Dusty Rhodes did. Deciding he wanted to turn the Road Warriors into bad guys despite the fact they were loved, Rhodes came up with an angle where Animal would stab him in the eye using their famous shoulder pads. It was all leading to a match at Starrcade 88 where the future Legion of Doom would take on Dusty and Sting, and although Turner was livid, he waited till the event was done before telling Rhodes that he could go home for good. And yeah, to be fair, this was more of a case of Dusty going too far as opposed to WCW, but it remains a long talked about example of a company biting itself in the ass. It wasn't massively over or something fans were invested in, and all it did was create controversy. The finger poke of doom. The 4th of January 1999 was a night that changed wrestling forever, and not in a good way. Well, no, from a WWE point of view, it was great because it was when Mick Foley won the world title for the first time. But WCW went in a very different direction and pretty much pissed off their entire fan base. These two events clashed as well because just before we would get this live fiasco, commentator Tony Schiavone was instructed to tell World Championship Wrestling Nitro viewers that they shouldn't turn over to the taped Raw show because all that was happening was Mankind was winning the belt. He then finished that off with, "Ha! That's gonna put butts in seats," and as soon as he had finished those words, around 600,000 people changed the channel. Whoops. They made the right call, mine, because they had stuck with Nitro, they would have been mortified. WCW had their own world title contest on this evening, as Kevin Nash, who had just beaten Goldberg's 173 match winning streak, was taking on longtime friend and now rival Hulk Hogan. Wasn't the worst thing in the world on paper. What was, is that despite all the build and the flipping story, Hogan poked Nash in the chest, he went down like he'd been shot, and the NWO had been reformed, which was the last thing anybody wanted. The audience felt screwed, the competition was having a feel-good moment on the other station, and if you want to say this is when WCW went into complete freefall, I don't think I'm going to argue with you. The madness with Jeff Jarrett and Hulk Hogan. Wrestling is at its best when it's not complicated and makes sense. Of course it is. Some trained athletes hate each other and they want to have a fight. That's it. You don't need to blur the lines to the point of madness. Vince Russo didn't really agree with that statement. His whole MO was to confuse the fans as much as possible to make you think that wrestling used to be fake, but maybe now it was real. But the amount of nonsense he brought to WCW in the year 2000 was something else, topped off by what happened at the Bash at the Beach pay-per-view. I will do my best to explain. Jeff Jarrett was scheduled to defend his WCW World title against Hulk Hogan and was gonna win. Hogan, however, invoked his creative control clause from his contract and said he wouldn't lose, leaving Jarrett to actually come out, lay down in the ring, and tell Hulk to just pin him because of all this. So we were taking backstage shenanigans and just showing it to the audience. For some reason, Hogan then cut a promo on Russo saying how awful all this was, before Vinny himself came out later and said all of that was null and void, and Jarrett was going to take on Booker T instead. What? The plan was for Hogan to return down the line and have a champion versus champion feud, but mercifully we never got to that because higher-ups in the company actually saw some sense. This was terrible 20 years ago, and it is terrible now. Miss Hancock's forgotten pregnancy. Okay, brace yourself for this. On the 13th of August 2000, Miss Hancock and Major Guns, and yes, those names are what you think they are, had a fight in some mud. Because why not? Guns won after kicking Hancock in the stomach, and it was heavily implied that she was pregnant, and this kick may have cost her the child. Oh boy. Over the next few months, this all became part of Nitro as on-screen lover David Flair and Hancock went through all the emotions, including adultery, and naturally the big reveal that David wasn't the father. The narrative then became a case of who is the dad. He and Buff Bagwell even had a first blood DNA match. Flub off. The spotlight was then shone on Jeff Jarrett when all of a sudden, it just stopped. The story vanished from TV, as did Hancock, only to return a few months later with Sean Stasiak by her side. To make this worse, she had a stroller as well, and then claimed she made up the pregnancy for attention and that her baby was actually Stasiak. Kill me. Tank Abbott threatens murder. Towards the end of their life, WCW loved pole matches, or Vince Russo did. Every stupid thing found its way onto a pole, including a mouse Viagra, and even Judy Bagwell. I mean, she was on a forklift, but it was the same damn thing. Another of these treats was when Tank Abbott fought Big Al in a leather jacket on a pole match. It was just these two punching each other for 4 minutes until Tank got the jacket and won. Who cares, right? Exactly. It was afterwards when things picked up. Why? Well, Abbott got a switchblade and held it to Al's throat, telling him that he was, and I quote, going to f***ing kill him. Tony Schiavone tried to explain that this meant Tank was going to cut his beard, but there was one problem.
Big Al didn't have a beard. Nobody actually knew what was going on or how this happened, with the only real takeaway being that an actual murder may be about to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, WCW. Now, Terry Funk saves Chris Candido from a horse. As was the way in the late 90s and early 2000s, you had to have a hardcore title. ECW had started a trend that everybody jumped on, with both WWF and WCW kind of treating theirs as a joke. You did see a lot of hard-hitting action though, so I suppose it was fine. In the year 2000, Terry Funk and Chris Candido were fighting over it on an episode of Thunder when things got out of hand. The match went all the way to the back, then outside onto a flatbed truck that sped away from the arena. I mean, what the hell was going on? The pair wound up at a ranch because of course they did, and you know what? Funk and Candido actually had a pretty fun fight. Unfortunately, the nearby horses hadn't been clued up about this, and after Terry had hit Chris with the pile driver, the nervous steed kicked out, coming way too close to smashing Candido in the skull. If it had connected with Chris's head, he likely would have died. There's nothing wrong with this kind of scrap in principle, but just do it away from the damn horse. Number 3, Oklahoma. Everybody was taking pot shots during the Monday Night Wars. Some were stupid, most were unnecessary, but WCW's parody of Jim Ross portrayed by Ed Ferrara known as Oklahoma was straight up mean-spirited and horrible. Most fans knew that JR had suffered from horrendous bouts of Bell's palsy throughout his career, and yet WCW thought it'd be fine to take shots at him for his illness. This is very, very wrong. Eventually, the sheer outlandishness of it was picked up on and that part of the character was dropped, but for some reason, Oklahoma continued and was an integral part of Nitro. He became a super misogynist and the whole thing hit rock bottom when the fake JR brought out then WCW Cruiserweight Champion Medusa so a doctor could lambast her. I mean, it was awful. It was just awful. The sheer lunacy of this also saw him win that title, becoming the heaviest champion in history, and this was bad from the start and it got worse and worse and worse. And what did we do it for? To take the mick out of a guy that was universally beloved by fans. Great work, you geniuses. Number 2, Canyon and the Kemper Arena. Before we start, I don't think this was on Canyon. In fact, anytime someone talks about the man, it's nothing but glowing praise. Either way though, WCW should never have done this. If you recognize the name Kemper Arena, it's because it's where Owen Hart tragically fell to his death on the 23rd of May 1999. Remains one of the worst things to ever happen within pro wrestling, and 21 years on, it's just as heartbreaking. It never ever should have gone down. Despite that, however, a little shy of the first anniversary of this, World Championship Wrestling thought it would be a good idea to have a pay-per-view in the same venue and have a wrestler take a stupid, needless bump as the announcers sold it like something was seriously wrong. So essentially aping the Owen Hart situation. What the hell? Teasing death regardless is bad enough, but to do it like this was unthinkable. Canyon was shot off the top of a cage by Mike Awesome as everyone sold it as if the worst had happened. What does make it worse is that both guys would pass away within the same decade, and this is not why we watch wrestling. It is just not. Number 1, the final solution. This one baffles my brain, especially as a Jewish man. What on earth was anybody thinking? As Hulk Hogan had arrived in WCW, of course the promotion was going to jump on the whole "what monster will stop him" gimmick that had been working for years. Before long, a stupid group called the Alliance to End Hulkamania had been established and featured the likes of Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, and Meng. You want to know who else was in it though? The final solution. How? The real-life Jeep Swenson was given this name, and thankfully after a sea of complaints it got changed. Wasn't that great as it was switched to the Ultimate Solution, and management's claim that they had no idea around the historical meaning of this was even more insulting. If you're lying, you're assholes, and if you're telling the truth, why on earth aren't you more educated? This really was bottom of the barrel stuff, and if it was done to garner some kind of attention, it got all the wrong headlines, so nobody benefited anyway. As some interesting trivia to end this as positively as we can, Swenson actually went on to play Bane in the Batman and Robin movie, although sadly passed away 2 months after it was released. Man, oh dear.
Attitude might have been WWE's golden meal ticket to win the Monday Night Wars, establish a pro wrestling monopoly, and generally rule the bloody world, but Ted Turner kinda did it first. I'm Andy from WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 10 ideas WWE blatantly stole from WCW. Number 10, edgy characters and attitude. The WWE product was largely rubbish in 1996. Wrestlers like Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and more were putting on in-ring clinics, but the company was still clutching on to cartoonish presentations that now felt completely outdated. That's why Steve Austin was such a bolt of lightning. However, rewatch Austin's early run as Stone Cold and you'll still see a lot of the tame old stuff. Austin didn't really come into his own as a character until 1997, which was well after the NWA's bad guys so good at being bad guys that they got cheered for it routine even kicked in. That edge, that different tone, gave Vince McMahon the blueprints to fashion WWF attitude with a short while later. WCW were the first to blur the lines and made a truckload of cash doing so. The NWO was hot, the product was genuinely cool and edgy. Vince McMahon took that template, ultimately made it more successful, pushed the envelope even further, and made even more money, but he wouldn't have got to that all on his own. Number 9. The Evil Boss. Mr. McMahon might be the ultimate evil boss character in pro wrestling, but Eric Bischoff was doing it a full year before his rival, having joined the NWO in November 96. Austin vs. McMahon is often portrayed as groundbreaking for numerous reasons, and to be fair, it is. It's the most important feud in wrestling history. But this version of Vince McMahon on screen was not the original. Bischoff had been working a similar shtick way earlier. His role in the NWO cannot be glossed over. It was important to Hollywood Hogan's presentation as a heel and provided an authoritative on-air dueling person-man-guy-person that could battle in promos with Hulk's babyface foes. Mr. McMahon was the WWE-ified version of this, taking the idea of an evil boss to even greater heights. Number 8. The granddaddy of them all. WWE barely uses this old WrestleMania nickname anymore. They typically go with the Show of Shows or the Showcase of the Immortals. Those are the ones they lean on a more regular basis. Now, that might not be because the granddaddy of them all actually belonged to Starrcade first, but the granddaddy of them all definitely belonged to Starrcade first. The first Starrcade took place with that nickname in 1983, 2 years before the first Mania. It was wrestling's original mega event, not Mania. And then 85 rolled around and WWE most gleefully pretended that nobody had ever tried such a thing, including pilfering the nickname. Number 7. The Cruiserweight Division Template. What was the Light Heavyweight Championship if not a bid to claim some of the thunder that WCW had landed with their Cruiserweight title? WWE introduced the Light Heavyweight tournament in 1997, 1 mere month after Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero had torn off the roof in a legendary match. And there's no way in hell that you can convince me that that was a coincidence. The McMahons wanted a piece of the high-flying pie. Bruce Pritchard has pretty much admitted on his podcast that this was the case, promptly booking international stars like Taka Michinoku and Pantera to come over. This is an example of something WWE lifted from WCW and executed rather poorly. The light heavyweight strap was far less than WCW's cruiserweight belt, particularly during the cruiserweight belt's peak years. And all due respect to my childhood favourite S.A. Rios, but it just didn't stack up, and everybody kinda knew it. Number 6. Raven's Flock. Eric Bischoff has previously dismissed Raven, for better or worse, as nothing more than a solid mid-card act whom he doesn't think could have main evented WCW cards in the late 90s. But Raven could do something else, catch WWE's eye and influence The Undertaker's career direction. Raven's Flock followed him around like lost puppies. Perry Saturn, Kidman, Sick Boy, Lodi, and more were all misfit toys who didn't appear to have much of a place elsewhere on the roster when they started cozying up to their leader, their intoxicating leader, in 1997. What does that sound like to you guys? Taker's Ministry of Darkness, that's what. The likes of Midian, Viscera, The Brood, and Acolytes all fit the misfit mold in 1999 as well. Now, I might be nuts with this one, but I firmly believe that the Ministry was a souped-up satanic flock. The presentation was very similar, and Raven has always carried his character like a deity, much like a certain dead man. Number 5. The Latino World Order. The most recent WCW reprisal in WWE flies in the face of how the LWO was initially presented to the world. Rey Mysterio, who appears to be the leader of the current group, didn't want to be in the LWO in 1998. Rey was booked to shun Eddie Guerrero's offer of a spot in the LWO at the first time of asking. Then, typically, WCW WCW's writers burned through some more story before losing interest in a Latino spin-off for the much successful NWO, and that was that, until 2023. The LWO idea must be kind of curious to those of you who didn't live through the original in WCW, but approximately 25 years on, someone who wasn't even a key member of the original group has reprised the faction on WWE television with no New World Order anywhere to be found. It's an interesting move, but a fun one. The new stable absolutely rules, and it gets talented people on television on a more regular basis. It's great, if you ask me, and if this was stolen, I mean, obviously it was, it's literally the same thing, then I can let them off of it. This kicks ass. Number 4, Mr. Ass equals the Booty Man. Billy Gunn liked to pick him, kick him, watch him, and stick him. Of course he did. He was Mr. Ass. He likes ass. Anyway, it was pretty juvenile humor typical of the late 90s in pro wrestling, but again, it wasn't totally fresh. WCW beat the WWF to the punch. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Booty Man. That's 1995 to 96 gimmick played by former WWE star Ed Brutus Beefcake Leslie was something else. He was obsessed with his own butt because that was the gimmick, and he even had the booty babe Kimberly Page in his corner for his matches. Of course, this predated Gunn's own asinine tactics, kill me, by a few years, but nobody really talks about that. Number 3, Hell in a Cell is WWE's War Games. What if we put a roof on it? That suggestion apparently came from the lips of one Jim Cornette, who also pitched that the newfangled cage design would allow for some brawling around ringside while people were technically still locked up. Hell in a Cell was born as a result of this, and it seemed so fresh and original in 1997. But it was probably based on War Games. WWE would eventually bring the old NWA/WCW favorite back onto the scene in 2017, but they palmed off the notion of War Games for decades. From a distance, both setups looked fairly similar to fans watching on. War Games had the double cage, sure, but Hell in a Cell's intimidating scale made up for the fact that it was just one structure instead of two. Nonetheless, WWE has both of them now, so I guess they got their cake and ate it in the end. Number 2, SmackDown's presentation equals Thunder. That was probably the noise that you could hear coming out of Eric Bischoff's office when higher-ups in WCW told him that Ted Turner wanted a brand new 2-hour primetime show every Thursday. Thunder was born in early 98, and Eric had to try and make things as different as possible from the already established Nitro every single week. The very next year, Vince McMahon debuted SmackDown. The show became a Thursday night staple as well, and that can't have been accidental. Also, this is something nobody within WWE would ever admit, but SmackDown's blue color scheme was totally lifted from Thunder's cold, almost icy aesthetic. Red and black on Mondays, blue and white on Thursdays. WWE can brag about introducing Raw before WCW Nitro, but they can't have the same claim with any confidence that SmackDown didn't leech a little bit from Thunder. Even though SmackDown is now the most watched wrestling show in the entire world, and Thunder is, well, you know, a section on the network. Number 1, having more than one world title. The new WWE World Heavyweight Championship is a version of the old WCW World title, the big gold belt with a big old WWE logo slapped right in the middle. This isn't the first time that Vince McMahon's company has used that title design though. They introduced the same belt, sort of, minus the WWE logo back in 2002, but dropped all of the WCW branding. Having more than one world title on your books isn't something unique to WWE either. WCW had both the NWA and international straps knocking around on the product in the early 90s. They then unified the latter with the newly minted WCW World title to create one identifiable world belt and sort all the confusion out. So in short, the promotion claimed the original big gold belt as their own, then echoed WCW by running multiple world championships in the same company. History has sort of repeated itself, and probably for the better. We kind of need two titles, right? One world title on Raw, one on SmackDown.
Now, WCW might have been pioneers when it came to the pay-per-view format, but that doesn't necessarily mean they always got it right. The company put on some utterly awful shows over the years with some truly bizarre matches in the final spot, the best of which are detailed right here. And if you can believe it, the year 2000 only appears twice. Who'd have thunk it, eh? So I'm Gareth, this is WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are the 10 weirdest WCW pay-per-view main events ever. Number 10, Hollywood Hulk Hogan vs. Roddy Piper, Starrcade 1996. During the 1980s, you could not have asked for a better main event match than Hulk Hogan vs. Rowdy Roddy Piper. This was the feud that had closed out the very first WrestleMania and had helped turn WWE into the biggest promotion in America. However, by the time 1996 rolled around, well, a lot had changed. Hogan and Piper closed out Starrcade 96 when they were both in their mid-40s, which meant something very different back then than it does today. But that's not really why this match is so odd. After years of failing to defeat the Hulkster as a heel, gallant babyface Piper made the NWO leader pass out in a sleeper hold, winning him the match and the WCW title. At least that's what everyone thought at the time. Despite Hogan being the champion and this being the main event of the biggest show of the year, Piper apparently forgot to make this match for the belt, rendering his victory ultimately useless. What a waste of time. Hollywood Hulk would hold on to the gold until August the following year, and Piper would never once get his mitts on the top prize. Boo. Number 9, Goldberg vs. Scott Hall, sold out 1999. At Starrcade 1998, Kevin Nash defeated Goldberg to win the WCW title and end Bill's undefeated streak in one of the most controversial booking decisions in wrestling history. And oh boy, there have been a lot of those. Nash got a huge assist in this match from his buddy Scott Hall, who used a castle prod to weaken Goldberg so Big Sexy could hit him with a powerbomb. Only in WCW, eh? This all led to the main event of the next pay-per-view, sold out 1999, which saw Hall and Goldberg go one-on-one in a stun gun ladder match. Just one question, what the hell is a stun gun ladder match? The objective of this bizarre bout was to retrieve the titular weapon, which was hanging above the ring, and then use it on your opponent. Yep, wrestling is a bit weird, isn't it? Having these two fight over a stun gun somewhat lessened the severity of their feud, which probably did deserve a main event match. Goldberg won, by the way, avenging his loss in one of the strangest ways possible. Hooray? And while we're talking about strange main event matches, what do you think is the strangest main event that you've ever seen? It may be included in this list already, but if it's not, and even if it's outside of WCW, just throw it in the comments and we will all look at it and go, yep, that is weird. Number 8, Goldberg vs. Chronic, Halloween Havoc 2000. The idea of one wrestler fighting 2 or more opponents is a weird one at the best of times, but the story behind this handicap match makes it even more odd. Goldberg was booked to face the tag team of Chronic, Brian Clark and Brian Adams, at Halloween Havoc 2000, in a match where, if he lost, he would be kicked out of WCW for good. The match was supposed to take place earlier in the night, but after the former Atlanta Falcon was laid out in a mysterious attack, it was pushed back to give him more time to heal up. Wow, they must have had something seriously special planned to go to all this trouble, right? Well, spoiler alert, they did not. Instead, Goldberg came out and handily defeated both men in a match that lasted under 4 minutes, and that was it. This might have been fine if it hadn't been the focal point of the show, but the fact that it displaced Booker T versus Scott Steiner for the world title from the main event made this ridiculous decision even harder to swallow. Number 7, Hulk Hogan versus The Butcher, Starrcade 1994. Everybody's relied on a favor from a friend at some point in their lives, but few people have ever mooched off someone so successfully for so long as Ed Leslie. The man best known as Brutus the Barber Beefcake made the most of his real-life friendship with Hulk Hogan during the height of his career. Fun fact, a quiz about him actually led to me being shaved bald too. Go and find it on YouTube, it's still there. But back to him and Hogan. This favoritism was on full display at Starrcade 1994, which ended with Hogan defending the WCW Championship against The Butcher, aka one of Beefer's 6,000 career gimmicks. The Butcher had turned on Hogan earlier in the year, aligning with the Three Faces of Fear in an effort to take his bestie's title. And unfortunately for everyone watching, this meant sitting through 12 minutes of bland, uninspired wrestling from a man who had absolutely no business headlining WCW's version of WrestleMania. Mercifully, this was the one and only time Leslie was ever put in this sort of position by a major company. Even WWE at the height of Hulkamania knew that this was a bad idea. But WCW clearly did not have the same level of clarity when it came to standing up against their biggest star brother. Number 6, Sting versus the Black Scorpion, Starrcade 1990. During Sting's first NWA World Heavyweight Championship reign back in 1990, he needed a credible heel challenger that was not Ric Flair. Sadly, there weren't many of those around, so head booker Ole Anderson came up with an idea. Anderson introduced the Black Scorpion, a masked man from Sting's past who tormented him for months. This led to a title match between the two at Starrcade, where if the Scorpion lost, he would unveil his true identity, the drama. The Stinger beat the different kind of Stinger with a diving crossbody, and then after a struggle pulled off his mask to reveal Ric Flair. What? As it turns out, Anderson had no idea who he wanted the Scorpion to be when he started running the gimmick. After a number of options fell through, Flair was begged to return to the main event scene, which he did so under the proviso that he would get to beat Sting later down the line. This was a complete and utter booking mess that led to one of the most disappointing unmaskings in wrestling history. So yeah, not exactly the way you want to end your flagship pay-per-view. Thank you for stopping by to watch this WhatCulture Wrestling video today, you lovely person. If you're enjoying yourself, then hit that subscribe button down below and you'll get more enjoyment out of more WhatCulture videos that will land on your screen. That's how it works. Number 5, Jeff Jarrett versus Diamond Dallas Page versus David Arquette, Slamboree 2000. At least when David Arquette won the WCW World Heavyweight Championship, the company had the decency to do it on TV and not on pay-per-view. The Scream actor did get to headline a major show, however, as he technically defended the gold against Jeff Jarrett and Diamond Dallas Page at the 2000 edition of Slamboree. This was a triple cage match inspired by the multi-Academy Award winning movie Ready to Rumble. I may have made the first part up. And each part of the cage contained a new variety of weapon. The third and final stage was the Guitar Room, Jarrett's signature weapon of course. But it was Arquette who used one to turn on his friend DDP and hand Double J the belt, his belt, that he just won. Okay then. Things got even crazier when after the bell, Kanyon ran down to help Page, only to get intercepted by Mike Awesome. The former ECW man lobbed Kanyon off the top of the cage to send him plummeting down to earth, which would have been a cool spot had this show not taken place almost 1 year to the day and in the same building as Owen Hart's tragic death from a similar stunt gone wrong. Oh boy. Number 4, Hulk Hogan and Dennis Rodman versus Lex Luger and the Giant, Bash at the Beach 1997. Some wrestlers worked their butts off for decades without ever coming close to a pay-per-view main event for a major company. Dennis Rodman got to do it twice just by being pals with Hulk Hogan though. The legendary NBA player first appeared on WCW pay-per-view at Bash at the Beach 1997 as an honorary member of the NWO. Alongside the Hulkster, he took part in a tag team match against Lex Luger and the Giant. Now you might understandably expect a match like this to only go a little while, just to let Rodman look good and give the fans something to talk about. But no, this dragged on for 22 entire minutes. To make things even stranger, if that was even possible, Rodzilla wasn't even the one who took the fall here. Instead, Luger beats Hogan by submission to end the match in a huge feel-good moment that eventually led to the Total Package winning the WCW title on Nitro. It turns out that Rodman not only main evented a WCW show, but he also played a small part in one of Nitro's biggest ever moments. And oh, he was not done there, folks. 1 year on from his first Bash at the Beach main event, Rodman stepped back into the ring to close the show once again. Only this time he was not the only basketball star involved. To counter Madonna's ex-boyfriend, Diamond Dallas Page recruited another top player, Karl Malone, to be his partner for this tag match against Rodzilla and Hogan. As luck would have it, Malone's Utah Jazz and Rodman's Chicago Bulls had just faced each other in the NBA Finals, making this a huge coup for WCW at the time. Once again, the company could have put on a 10 or so minute match to give the fans what they wanted and not let the non-wrestlers embarrass themselves. Instead though, they booked this match to go even longer than the one from the year before, because WCW. Viewers didn't even get the satisfaction of watching Hogan submit this year, as the Disciple, yet another of Ed Leslie's gimmicks, interfered to allow his best buddy to pin DDP for the win. This was an utterly horrible match that no amount of publicity could have justified. It was just a massive open goal that WCW put way over the crossbar in the end. Number 2, the Mega Powers versus the Alliance to end Hulkamania, uncensored 1996. In a desperate attempt to get him over as a babyface in 1996, WCW puts Hogan back together with his old Mega Powers partner Randy Savage, and pitted the two against a bunch of people who had all beefed with the Hulkster over the years. Ric Flair and Arn Anderson were there from the Four Horsemen, whilst Hogan's recent scuffles with the Dungeon of Doom were represented by Meng, the Barbarian, Kevin Sullivan, and Lex Luger. Zeus, the villain from Hogan's 1989 movie No Holds Barred, was given the new name Z-Gangster, and Robert Jeep Swanson was put under a mask as the ultimate solution. That's a lot of people right there. Hogan and Savage fought all 8 of their foes in a doomsday cage match, where they had to work their way down from the top of the structure to the floor. This was some of the most cartoonish stuff that WCW ever did. The babyfaces were hitting people with frying pans at one point. Look at them go. This was an absolutely mad match, especially when you realise that Hogan Hogan forming the NWO was just 3 months away at this point. What a weird world. Number 1, Diamond Dallas Page and Jay Leno versus Hollywood Hogan and Eric Bischoff. Road Wild 1998. Now, Rodman and Malone may not have been wrestlers, but at least they're athletes. Someone who is very much not an athlete, though, is chat show legend Jay Leno. But that did not stop him from main eventing WCW's Road Wild pay-per-view in 1998. The comedian became involved with wrestling after Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff invaded The Tonight Show, challenging him to a match at the upcoming show. Leno found an ally in Diamond Dallas Page, who always seemed to get stuck babysitting celebrities, and it was on. Instead of putting Goldberg in the main event, who had beaten Hogan for the WCW title just 2 months earlier, WCW booked the NWO guys against Page and Leno for the final match. This sideshow battle came to an end when Kevin Eubanks, Leno's bandleader on his show, hit Bischoff with a diamond cutter, allowing his boss to pin Eazy-E, with his shoulders about 6 inches off the mat. Oh, Jay, what do you like? A completely insane idea that resulted in rock-bottom buy rates for the company. Jay Leno's involvement in Road Wild 1998 has gone down as one of the most infamous decisions WCW ever made, and that is saying something. Let me tell you this, WCW content is a treasure trove for anyone hoping to say the words "who the hell is that guy" over and over again. The likes of Nitro and Thunder had all the big stars like Goldberg, the NWO, Sting, Ric Flair, and more, sure. But Eric Bischoff also packed in a ton of names you will not remember too. Like this interesting lot. I'm Gareth, this is WhatCulture Wrestling, and here are 10 forgotten WCW wrestlers you totally don't remember. Number 10, the Mod Squad. Here comes the Spike, and here comes the Basher. They're not Demolition, but they do have banter. That definitely was not the Mod Squad's entrance track during their short stay on WCW screens in 1990. The motorcycle cop pair were enhancement talents at best, but they'd actually been around the horn before showing up in the big time. WCW would be a last hurrah though. Both guys ultimately retired from the ring in 1991. Spike was Jim Jefferson and Basher was Mac Jefferson. They came together and debuted as a tag team in 1984, a whole 10 years before little Gareth was even born. Then worked a few shots here or there for the NWA before the big World Championship Wrestling rebrand. Sadly, the Mod Squad pair would not play a part in WCW's rise throughout the 90s. Again, they'd kiss goodbye to that wrestling noise long before Nitro was ever even a thing. One Reddit user describes Spike and Basher as Big Boss Man light, which is actually pretty accurate. Vince McMahon probably would have loved a biker tag like this though. Just think of the merchandise opportunities. The Mod Squad were definitely money left on the table. Number 9, Jungle Jim Steele. Say hello to the love child of X-Pac and his 1-2-3 Kid days and Jimmy Snuka. Jungle Jim Steele was one of the first products of WCW's Power Plant Training School. He made his debut for the company in 1993 and likely had hopes that his Snuka knockoff character would turn some heads and thrill fans. It was not to be though. Steele was released from his contract just 1 year later. Ouch. The Tarzan-style gimmick had become a firm fave in pro wrestling circles for decades, and it seemed like an ideal fit for the still cartoony WCW of 93. But poor Jimbo just didn't quite reach the heights that Superfly did. He then had to settle for another short-lived stay in Paul Heyman's ECW after being shown the door. Incredibly, Steele did go on to enjoy a successful stint in All Japan between 1994 and 2002. Later, he also worked for New Japan before eventually hanging up his tights in 2008. WWE, though, would never come calling for this power plant graduate. Goldberg Smallberg. Won't somebody please think of Jimmy Steele? Feel the steel, baby. Number 8, Doc Dean. UK indie star Ian Dean used the name Doc Dean for most of his pro career. He grabbed WCW's attention after working New Japan's Best of the Super Juniors tournament in 1997. And whilst there, Dean scored wins over both Jushin Thunder Liger and Chavo Guerrero Jr. Not bad at all. Befriending Chris Jericho over in Japan would prove to be a blessing too. WCW signed Doc later that year, and he became something of a stalwart on the lower tier shows like Worldwide, Saturday Night, and long-forgotten syndicated Hour Pro. Dean's biggest match came versus Stevie Ray on the 2nd of July 1998 episode of Thunder, but he was honestly less of a cruiserweight concern and more of a job guy by then. Dean was released in the summer of 98 and quickly retired from wrestling due to an accumulation of injuries, which sucks a bit. Undeterred, the dude went on to start his own plumbing company, and good for him. He then sadly passed away in 2018. Honestly, it'd be a shock if any wrestling fans watching this did remember his matches though, but some of them are immortalized on WWE's platform at least, so that's something. So the wrestlers on this list are the ones that that people probably don't remember. But what about those WCW moments that people forget too? Which brings me to a question, my friends. What is your most underrated, forgotten moment in WCW history? You let me know in the comments section down below, you lovely person. Number 7, Chip Minton. Fun fact, you're looking at a 2-time Winter Olympian here. That is right. Chip Minton was part of the US bobsleigh team in 1994 and 1998, but he was also a WCW star in between training for the games. Chip worked his first matches for the company in 96, then took some time off the following year before returning in 98. That's when he made it to weeklies like Thunder. Oh yeah. Also, whilst Minton would never wrestle on flagship show Nitro, he did work on pay-per-view by playing his part in the bumper 60-man battle royal at World War III that same year. If only Chip could have won, he might have gone on to become a WCW World Champion. Look, even David Arquette won that belt, so nothing was impossible in Atlanta. You know it's true. Milton was another trainee coming out of the power plants who struggled to reach his full potential. Being honest though, his name just sucked, didn't it? And he was sacrificed to pet Project Wrath near the end of his WCW run. Back to sledding for Chip then. Number 6, JW Storm. Promising prospect JW Storm was in the oft-forgotten Maximum Overdrive team that put the Steiner brothers over at Clash of the Champions 12 in 1990. After that, WCW decided to split the duo and attack a singles push for JW. And by attack, yours truly means that they turned him into a Steven Seagal from Hard to Kill clone. It was quite a look. WCW business immediately went through the roof too. Not really, obviously. Storm going Seagal wasn't as daft as it seems now though. You see, Hard to Kill was a box office smash around that same time, so JW rocking the same look made sense and gave him some instant marketability. Unfortunately though, it didn't pay dividends, and Storm was let go less than 1 full year into his singles run. He'd then go on to become an occasional enhancement worker for the WWF until 1992. Someone should have given JW a call for the dreaded Brawl for All too, because he actually had an impressive 22-2 record as a boxer. For anyone interested, all of his wins came by knockout. You don't mess with this Storm. Thank you for spending a bit of time with us here at WhatCulture Wrestling today, you incredible person. Now stick around and hit that subscribe button for more of these fascinating wrestling videos. Number 5, Galaxy. Now this is a strange one. Galaxy was working matches for WCW as Damien at the same time. So in short, he wrestled as 2 different characters on the promotion's programming, and there was never any crossover. Announcers didn't acknowledge that it was the same wrestler either. Galaxy and Damo were totally separate. Right. I mean, that'd be like Santos Escobar portraying a masked gimmick on Raw, whilst also playing himself on episodes of SmackDown in the same week. It'd be weird. Now it is pretty quirky that WCW let something like this happen, but Galaxy probably wasn't that fussed. He was getting a payoff regardless of which persona he was booked to play. I bet it was quite fun playing 2 people for a bit though. Galaxy was introduced in 1996, but vanished around 6 months later. Damien became the man's go-to role on WCW TV after that. He'd stick around on the roster until 1999, then returned home to Mexico and continued his career until hanging it up in... Wait, he's still wrestling? What a guy! Number 4, Roadblock. Remember when impressionist Jason Sensation took the mick out of Owen Hart's old ring attire by saying, "I look like a damn road sign"? Well, WCW's Roadblock was literally a damn road sign. No, seriously, the wrestler's gimmick was that he blocked roads. Opponents had hit a dead end, my friend. To hammer home the point, Block carried a literal roadblock with him to the ring for matches. Just as well that nobody thought to be quite so literal with Bobby Brain Heenan. Alright, enough of the dad jokes for one list, maybe. Back to Roadblock and his bizarre WCW career. It ran 2 years between 1996 and 1998, all this. Block faced stars like Lex Luger, The Giant, Chris Benoit, DDP, and more during his time in the promotion. He had impressive size, but was more of a jobber to the stars than somebody Eric Bischoff was ever going to seriously push. Tragically, he didn't even wallop anybody with that prop either. What a damn waste. Number 3, Little Genie. Women's wrestling was never something WCW did particularly well. Now, in fairness, women's wrestling was never something the wrestling industry in North America did well generally throughout the 1990s. If you wanted awesome female grappling, then Japan was the place to go, and the quality even varied there. That's why it will not be surprising if literally no one recalls Little Genie. She'd started training to wrestle in 1996, took her in-ring bow in 1998, then signed on for a few WCW appearances between 1999 and 2000. That, inarguably, was the worst possible time to join this company. Genie's one and only Nitro performance came versus Mona, aka Molly Holly, on the 9th of August 99. And after that, management relegated her to the less important shows. Boo! Jeannie did her best on Saturday Night and Worldwide before working a string of house shows in April 2000, but they would prove to be her final showings under contract. What was that about WCW never doing women's wrestling very well? Yeah, they absolutely did not get it. Number 2, the Minotaur. Steve DeSalvo could have probably passed as an Ultimate Warrior cosplay on various WWF tribute shows in the 90s. Honestly, just stick some face paint on that handsome mug pictured right here, and you'd have a bargain bin Jim Hellwig to be proud of. Instead, WCW restrained themselves from debuting Renegade early, and had DeSalvo call himself the Minotaur. If you're a fan of Greek mythology and hoping that that name meant something, then, well, I'm sorry to disappoint, it was just a name, folks. Minotaur had absolutely nothing to do with some part bull, part man monster. That moniker was something Steve debuted in WCW too, so either they came up with it, or he came to the party with a half-baked idea. He'd faded into obscurity by 1991 anyway. Who knows why Vince McMahon and the WWF passed on DeSalvo during various tryouts between 1987 and 1990. McMahon was absolutely obsessed with muscles and cracking physiques during that era, and the heat from feds about steroid use hadn't kicked in yet. I mean, just look at this guy. Minotaur had WWF Project written all over him. Number 1, Johnny Attitude. On the surface, Johnny Attitude sounds like WCW trying to belittle the WWF's Attitude movement in the late 90s. But it actually wasn't. In fact, Johnny here started using that kayfabe surname in 1996, which was a good while before Vince McMahon was smugly encouraging you to get it on Federation screens. Attitude resembled a discount Mr. T at first. He'd keep that look for all of his matches on WCW Saturday Night, Worldwide, and Pro heading into 1998. Then someone on the creative team had a bright idea. Johnny would shave his head and start rocking a decidedly Goldberg-esque aesthetic in time for a US title challenge versus the man himself on the 25th of May, 98 Nitro. That right there was Attitude's first and final Nitro bout, and also his biggest in the promotion overall. WCW had a few of these cheesy named workers in the late 90s. Remember Kenny Chaos? How about Bobby Blaze? Sound like terrible superheroes. It was a creator-wrestler heaven in that locker room, for goodness sake. Johnny Attitude would stick around a little while longer and work several Saturday night tapings in 1999, before then disappearing from WCW TV. We salute you, Mr. Attitude. You, like the rest of this list, are forgotten no longer. For a bit.
A common comparison when wrestling fans want to get mad is this promotion has become WCW. That is because World Championship Wrestling really did fall off a cliff by the end of its run, but that's why I want to talk about it today. As you will see, nobody is even close. Cause hello, I am Simon from WhatCulture. Please do go and smash that subscribe button. And yeah, this is 10 times WCW was the craziest promotion ever. Number 10, Hulk Hogan meets the Dungeon of Doom. So we go back to 1995 with this one, and it just goes to show WCW was always kinda really wacky. Here Hulk Hogan was feuding with the Dungeon of Doom, a collection of wrestlers held together to make you think the Hulkster would actually lose. Given who he chose to be in this, it didn't work. Nobody bought it for a second. Now, I think they were meant to be some sort of cult, and for that reason they had a lair. Which, yep, one night Hogan felt like he should go and explore. I mean, you tell me, I've no idea. His real shock was that there were no Hulkamaniacs here, a line that has remained funny ever since, and Hogan is just hilarious throughout this. It is like watching some crazy B-movie set in the basement of death. You've also got Kevin Sullivan speaking in riddles as the Taskmaster, and then there's the music. My gosh, the music. If you told me a 4-year-old with a Casio keyboard wrote it, I'd believe you. It just gets weirder and weirder too, and if you were used to the WWF version of Hulk, you were even more baffled. Couldn't have been more cartoony if WCW tried, and that is saying something. If you do watch it, please remember, no, you haven't done drugs. Number 9, those mini-movies. Okay, right, so what we're about to talk about must have been the inspiration when it came to WCW and making this sort of thing, because once again, my gosh. Because to build up events like Halloween Havoc 1992, Super Brawl 1993, and Bash at the Beach, the powers that be ran what can only be described as mini-movies. Now let's remember, being a wrestler does not mean you can act, and yet we still saw Sting go to Vader's White Castle of Fear, and honestly, you gotta see it. The over-the-top narration is hilarious, and you're essentially told the Mastodon and Harley Race live in some sort of giant cave. I would actually take more of these today because they are so crazy, and remember, WCW was doing this to sell pay-per-views. That's right. They thought that if you were on the fence, seeing the Stinger and the British Bulldog blowing up some boats with some dude called Cheatham would actually get you to drop some cash. So yeah, it is totally bonkers, but please, somebody, anybody, bring these back? They are so crazy. Number 8, Gene Okerlund shoots. Centered around the one and only Mean Gene Okerlund, who is interviewing the Natural Born Thrillers, I think Gino decided to have some fun. Or he was just done with WCW's nonsense. Because when Mike Sanders does an impression of opponent Conan, Okerlund fires back, real good impression, ya prick. What? Sean O'Haire then threatens Gene, but he is totally unfazed. He tells Sean to blow it out his ass. This is amazing. Everybody just has to sell it like Gene is losing his mind, and more power to him. I'm sure he'd been messed around enough, so decided to just enjoy himself, even if it was at the expense of the wrestlers. For the younger viewer too, this is the equivalent of Megan Morant telling Grayson Waller to jump out of a window. It just wouldn't happen. Number 7, RoboCop the wrestler. So this one is pretty damn famous as it would be. I mean, one day RoboCop just turned up at a WCW show. Why wouldn't he? Happening at Capital Combat 1990, it's even better than that, because he was here to assist Sting. Yep. I suppose the robotic cop was hanging out backstage, and when his good friend was in trouble, he thought, man, I better go and save him. Given that this attack was from the Four Horsemen, I'm still a little bit sad we never got Sting and RoboCop versus Ric Flair and Arn Anderson, and as I'm sure you figured out, this was essentially a sponsorship deal. So I guess at least WCW made some cash. It is so funny to watch because Mr. Cop also saves Sting from being imprisoned because he rips a cage door off. Surely, if you'd never watched wrestling before, you were baffled. Let's just say what we're all thinking though. Somebody needs to put Robo in the Hall of Fame immediately. Number 6, Scott Steiner's tyranny. You can tell WCW had lost its way in 2000 because Scott Steiner just decided to go nuts and nobody stopped him. It's wild. Big Papa Pump would even cut promos saying how much World Championship Wrestling sucked these days and that people should tune into Raw instead. Plus one time on Nitro from nowhere, he just said that Ric Flair was a jealous old bastard. Once again, if you need context, this would be like Cody Rhodes walking out on the NXT he did and encouraging all of us to go and watch AEW instead. It just ain't happening. If you weren't in management, it was a heat to watch, however, because you couldn't believe it. And look, it made Steiner feel totally legit and dangerous because he was just saying whatever the flub he wanted to say. Plus, we soon then found out the company had suspended him because he had kicked the crap out of DDP for no reason. Although no, there was a reason. Diamond Dallas Page had asked Scott to stop saying offensive things about his wife. My word. Somehow all of this worked as Steiner had quite the run 2 decades ago. Only in WCW. Number 5, Terry Funk fights a horse. I mean, who else but Terry Funk? If you do just want to smile all day long, you do have to go and find the 31st of May 2000 Thunder, though, which was always an insane program, and watch Funk versus Chris Candido, who were fighting for the hardcore title. Due to this championship, the fight was happening in the outside world and not in the ring, when the pair somehow ended up in a stable. Once again, you tell me. Now, the horse residing there didn't know what was going on, or that this was sports entertainment, freaked out, and booted Terry right in the head. Seriously, at first it's terrifying, because that can kill a man. Google it. If this were you and I, we would have totally gone screw this and legged it, but not Funk. He turned to the animal, told it off, and challenged it to a fight. Don't tell me he's not the best ever. Amazingly, the horse even backs away a little bit, so he must have known. And while we are here, just go and watch any of the hardcore stuff in WCW from 2000. I don't think they had a clue what they were doing. Number 4, WCW gives away WWF results. This sounds quite tame today given what the internet has become, but you do have to put yourself in the late 90s mindset. It wasn't like spoilers didn't exist because online content was already flying, but it wasn't super popular or accessible. So when Eric Bischoff started walking out on Nitro and just told people what was happening on Raw that night, well, we were all stunned. This was made possible due to the fact WCW was going live every week, whereas the WWF would hop between that and tape shows. So we'll do it again. You're watching SmackDown, Rampage has already been recorded, and Michael Cole just tells you Daniel Garcia is losing to Miro, so you don't need to go and see that. It's bonkers. If we're honest too, it was higher stakes than this, as Raw and Nitro were in a proper intense ratings battle, and each wanted supremacy. Bischoff would even talk about wanting to kill the WWF for good. There's more too, as Eric would also stroll to the ring holding signs that read WWE Fears Ratings on it, and he challenged Vince McMahon to a fight on pay-per-view. And we'll talk about that later. The whole thing was out of control. Number 3, Hollywood Hogan's own head. Yep. Please bear with me. If you are a hardened fan, you know the 1990 Starrcade main event between Hollywood Hogan and Sting was rubbish. The whole build had been incredible, and then we got this bizarre screwy finish, which still doesn't make sense today. Was it a fast count? Wasn't it a fast count? Just have Sting win the title and call it a day. Nothing is perfect, mind, and that was true for this feud too, because some weeks WCW just went, well, WCW. For example, before the pay-per-view, Eric Bischoff decided to host Hollywood Hogan Appreciation Night, where he gave Hulk loads of gifts. As is the way in wrestling, the last one was from the Stinger, and he was quite a strange man. This was a mannequin version of Hogan's head. I suppose this is quite threatening, but honestly, the way Hulk sells this is painfully funny, as he acted as if this was his own skull, even though he was using his own eyes to see it. I mean, you'd be freaked out, sure, but this was next level. It also meant Nitro went off air with Hogan staring at himself and screaming, but go look in the background. Bischoff isn't scared at all, he's just kind of rolling his eyes like, man, that's Sting, what an idiot. So you have to presume that nobody had chatted about how they were meant to react to this, especially as the announcers were not that bothered either. This is when I remember I really missed WCW, because it was the best. And the worst, but that's why it was the best. Number 2, a match ends with an electrocution. I mean, what were they thinking? WCW actually killed a man on TV, and then they just returned to the show. What? We do have to go all the way back to Halloween Havoc 1991, and yes, of course, it's the Chamber of Horrors match. If you need this summed up too, well, it's the definition of feeling like you have to do something new for the sake of doing something new. It would involve 2 teams with 4 members who of course had instruments of torture, with the ultimate goal to strap somebody to an electric chair. I am not making any of this up. Abdullah the Butcher pulled the short straw so was attached to this device when somebody pulled the lever and we saw some sparklers go off. I mean, it's quite funny anyway, but the fans are totally baffled by it all. What was the response meant to be? Unsurprisingly, Abdullah didn't really sell this because what was he going to do? But then he just gets up and walks to the back. Again, I'm not kidding. You think at worst, somebody could have stretchered him out of there. It also meant the whole match was utterly pointless, and once again is a nice reminder that in 1991, sometimes WCW was not all that good. Number 1, Bischoff challenges McMahon. As promised, here we are. Let's get into it because it was ridiculous. I'm just going to continue in the same vein as I feel it sells it better, but you're watching Dynamite. Tony Khan walks out and he tells Triple H AEW Revolution is around the corner, so why don't they fight? I mean, Twitter would absolutely savage him. If we go back to 1998, though, this is exactly what happened before WCW's Slamboree show. It wasn't just like Eric called him out either. World Championship Wrestling dedicated all these videos of Bischoff telling Vince he better be there, or the world is gonna think he's a massive coward. WCW even went as far as to have Michael Buffer announce him as the winner when McMahon decided against it. Obviously. It stank of desperation because all fans knew this wasn't possible. If Vinnie Mac had done it, millions would have bought this pay-per-view, which is the last thing the boss of the WWF wanted. Amazingly, even Bischoff's nearest and dearest warned him against this, as Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash told Eric, if McMahon does take the bait, he is gonna kick your ass. So once again, you really couldn't make this up. Ultimately, though, I hope you have learned something today. Sometimes wrestling can be goofy and it rocks. Sometimes wrestling can be goofy and it kills an entire company. You take care. Goodbye.